How you doing? I know you are. You guys are amazing. Amazing people. Okay, so if I can get you to come back to your seats right away, that'd be great, just so you're not disturbing the people now. I know the breaks are a little short. We're going to have a nice long dinner. We'll be fine, but not until we have this amazing trainer who's coming up right now. Are you ready? Yeah. No, you're not ready. Are you ready? Yeah. All right, you're starting to get there. This is worth it. This is worth it. So, our next trainer has been one of the top business and personal success speakers in the entire world. Entire what? He's given talks and seminars in every major city in the United States and Canada and over 45 different countries. He's the guru of gurus. Each year he speaks to over 250,000 people, and he's done that for years and years and years and years. He actually has one of the most successful product sales companies in the world. I don't know how many distributors he has. How many?
We put about $500 million worth.
Each, what, in total?
No, in total, yeah.
Yeah, almost $500 million in sales and products alone. Good or good? More than anyone else in the world. He has, if not the number one of the number one audio cassettes sales venues in history with Nightingale Conant, right? Yeah, if not number one, then close to it. He has started, built, or managed and turned around over 22 different businesses in the last 25 years. He's worked with over 1,000 different companies who all have his videos and cassettes for all of their people in 42 different countries, every major company you can imagine. He has written 45 books. Every year he writes 4 books. This year alone, he's releasing 8 books. Now, that's nothing short of incredible. That's what? Incredible. Twice as loud. Incredible. That's incredible. I might write 8 chapters in 2 years, okay? Just totally incredible. And he's a brilliant man. He's very, very, very smart. He doesn't usually put that on his bio or whatever, but I know him, and I know people who know him, and everybody who really knows him says the same thing about this gentleman. He's one of the most brilliant men on the planet. He's at another level than most people when it comes to intelligence and just really understanding the breakdown of things, the breakdown of success. And many of you have heard his voice for years and years and years on his products. He is one of the gurus of gurus. He's a great friend. He's very loyal. He's got a heart of gold. I am thrilled to have with us at the seminar of the century, Mr. Brian Tracy.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Please sit down. No. Thank you. Thank you. Please sit down. Please sit down. Wow. Wow. Get them under control. Please sit down. Please sit down. I got a lot of stuff to share with you. Let's not use up any more daylight than we have. Besides this rain coming in.
No, not with us. Sorry. It's clean away.
I am so delighted to be with you. You are amongst the elite in America and Canada, even the world today. You are in the top 10%. And that's why it's because you're here. Only the top 10%, maybe the top 5, maybe the top 1% of human beings in the world would ever make this trek all the way to Aspen just to learn how to become better in the future. I mean, that's phenomenal. Give yourselves a big hand. Congratulations. You're the best. And I want to give you the very best ideas I possibly can in the time that we have together here. But let me begin by saying, and Michael Gerber was talking about this, we're living at the very best time in all of human history. I am an economist by avocation. I read, I keep current with what's going on in the world. I've traveled in 90 countries, and I can tell you that North America today is the most booming single place in the world today. There are more opportunities, more possibilities for more people today than have ever existed in any other country at any other time in human history. And you are at the front of the line to take advantage of them. Yes. And our job today, our job in this conference is to give you ideas that you can use to take full advantage of this. More people are going to make more money in the years ahead than have been made in all of human history. I just read an article before I came down here by Brian Westbury. He's an economist I had dinner with in Chicago in April. And Brian Westbury is what you might call an optimistic economist, very smart. And he said that we are in what is called the long boom. Now, people talk about business cycles going up and down. If things go up, they have to go down and so on. But it's not necessarily true. Business cycles are caused by mistakes of government. The primary mistake they make is they raise taxes. If they raise taxes or they interfere with business, the flow of business, what will happen is the economy will spike. And that's why you have to be very careful who you vote for next time. Because if they say they're going to raise your taxes, that means it means you're going to cause the economy to spike. What Brian Westbury says is that we're in the 87th month of a long boom. Do you know that Britain, Britain, for example, and several other countries have been 157, 168, 195 months of continuous boom, that the boom goes on year after year after year. This idea that it's all coming to an end and we must run and put our heads in a hole, not true. This is a great time. And this boom can continue and can continue and can continue. And your job is to take advantage of it. How many people here would like to double their income? If I can show you how, will you give it a try? Yes. Well, that's the only test question of the day. Do you know how many times the average person tries on a new goal before they give up? Well, the average is less than one. Most people give up before they even try the first time. Interesting, I've studied success, and I'll come back to this in a second. What I find is there's four things that people want. All human beings worldwide, and I've spoken all over the world, all want four things. Number one is they want to be healthy and live a long life. Number two is they want to do work that they enjoy, do it well, and get paid well for it. Isn't that true? And number three is they want to have wonderful relationships with people that they love and care about, who love and care about them. And that's probably more important than anything else. And number four, everybody wants to achieve financial independence. We want to make enough money so that we never have to worry about money again. Isn't that true? So we're all setting these as goals. We're all continually saying, what are my goals? It's always one of these three things. I always ask people what their goals are, and I can always tell you what your goals are. The same thing. You want to be happy, you want to be healthy, you want to make a lot of money, you want to be financially independent. And then, but before anybody starts, they say, well, before I start, that's what I want, I need to take a quick vacation to a wonderful vacation place called Someday Isle. And most people, the 80-20 rule, 80% of the population lives on Someday Isle most of their lives. Someday I'll lose weight, and someday I'll start a business, and someday I'll read that book or take that course, or someday I'll get out of debt, or someday I'll get out of this lousy relationship, or Someday Isle. And they live on Someday Isle. And who are they surrounded with on Someday Isle? Are there people on Someday Isle? And what is the primary source of recreation on Someday Isle? It's swapping excuses. What's your excuse for not doing what you want to do? Well, you know, my mother didn't love me as much as she loved my sister, and my father was unkind, and my first job sucked, and my boss is a bitch, and wah, wah, wah. So it's like a child's nursery in a hospital on Someday Isle. They'll still go wah, 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 all their problems. I've got to tell you a quick story about Someday Isle. I was invited to speak. It was in Nashville. I was invited to speak to a large national organization, franchise organization. And because I was the keynote speaker, they put me at the head table. And they put me at the head table with a couple, and let's just call them Harry and Susan. And they told me their story. These were two of the most respected franchise owners within this national organization. And they told me this interesting story, and I never forgot it. It was just one of those stories that just like imprints on your mind. They said, when they got out of high school, they had very little going for them. They'd graduated from high school. He waited a year or two. They were childhood sweethearts. They got married. They're in their 20s. They got a little house, and they got a child and a second child. And they're trucking along, and they're 25, 30 years old. And he's working as a plumber, and she's working in the supermarket. And they have too much month at the end of the money, and they worry about money all the time. And they drive a couple of old cars, and they recycle their kids' clothes and repair bicycles for their kids. You know, that we all come from that. Anyway, but they didn't worry, they said. They had no worries because they knew that when Aunt Martha died, they'd be rich. Because they had an Aunt Martha. True story. They had an Aunt Martha, and Aunt Martha was wealthy. She had a beautiful home, and at one time she had taken them aside, and she'd said, you know, you have lots of brothers and sisters and so on, but of all the family, you're my favorites. And when I die, I'm leaving everything to you. And so they used to sit at home and they'd speculate about what they would do when Aunt Martha died. Now, they didn't want Aunt Martha to die. She was a wonderful woman. But she was in her 60s now. People don't live forever. You know, you never know what could happen. But they had her over for Sunday dinner, and they took her presents, and they took her on the little family vacations they had. They took wonderful care of Aunt Martha because, after all, they were her favorites, and they were going to get all the money when she died. Anyway, when she's about 35 years old, they're still financially in difficulties. They're sitting there at the kitchen table, and Susan, women are more practical about this, says to Harry, said, Harry, what if Aunt Martha lives another 20 years? We're in our 30s. Our kids are now growing up. They're 10, 12 years old. What if Aunt Martha lives another 20 years? She's 68, but she's got good health in her family, good genes. We would have waited all our life for Aunt Martha to die. We'd have lived in this condition all of our life. And it was a real shock. It's called in psychology a significant emotional event. It's like a thunderclap went off, and they realized, and they began to think, we've got to do something different. Well, as it happens, a friend of his at work was working with a janitorial franchise. And he said, would you help me in the evenings and weekends? So he said, sure. So he began to work with them evenings and weekends to make a little extra money. He turned out to have a natural faculty or facility for running cleaning crews, and they did a lot of commercial cleaning. And after about 6 months, he said, you should have your own franchise. He said, well, I don't know anything about a franchise. He said, well, the company will set you up. They'll train you how to do it. And he said, well, I don't have any money. He said, well, they'll advance you some money. I'll lend you some money. I'll help you get started. So they borrowed some money, put it together, bought a cleaning franchise, and got the kids to help, and Susan did the books, and it was very successful. And the company called them after a year and said, why don't you buy another franchise? And they hadn't thought about that, so they bought another franchise. And he was still working at his day job, and he bought another franchise, and he finally left his day job and bought another. Over the next 12 years, he bought a franchise every single year. By the end of 12 years, he had about 150 people working for him. He was worth several $1 million. They had a beautiful home. The kids were in the best colleges. They had solved all their financial problems. They were the most financially successful people in their whole social circle. And they were about 45 about this time, 45, 48, and then they got the news. Aunt Martha had died. Well, they were very sad about that. They went to the funeral with all the other family members, but the other family members didn't seem to be too upset about her having passed away. As a matter of fact, they seemed downright cheerful at the funeral. And so, you know where I'm going now. So the lawyer called them all together. The whole family got together, all the couples. They're all now in their 40s and 50s. They'd all were grown up with children, had grown up, and so on. And the lawyer opened up the will and read the will, and Aunt Martha had died broke. In fact, she'd been broke for years. She'd been living off loans. She'd mortgaged and hypothecated her home and borrowed against it. She'd been living off her family. She hadn't had any money for years and years. And they turned around and they found that members of the family were shocked. They were all shocked. They're standing around shocking like victims of a bomb blast. Well, what happened? Well, Aunt Martha had told each of them privately that they were her favorites. And when she died, they were going to leave all their money. She was going to leave all her money to them. And here they were all standing there. This couple was financially independent because they'd taken the reins of life in their hands. The others were shocked. They were in their 40s and 50s. Their life had largely passed, and while they waited for Aunt Martha to die. Now, the reason I tell you the story is, first of all, it's true. It was a real shocker for them. It was the turning point in their lives. But my question is this, what is your Aunt Martha? What is your Aunt Martha? What are you waiting for to happen before you go for it? Because we all have something. We all have a mental block or a break of some kind. And you have to keep asking, what is your Aunt Martha that keeps you on the island? And it's always an excuse of some kind. So I'm going to give you the first great rule for success. Are you ready? Vote yourself off the island. No more excuses. Do it or don't do it. Get on with it. Follow what Harv teaches you and get on with it. Ready, aim, ready, fire, fire, fire. Is that what Harv says? Is get on with it. Don't let anything hold you back. By the way, a couple of people come up here this morning and said they wanted to write a book. How many people here want to write a book? Well, I write a lot of books, and I'll show you how to write a book. You go to my website. It's called briantracy.com. Click on free newsletters. It'll say how to write a book. And it's exactly how I write 4 books a year and have them published by major publishers. I'm now in 36 languages in 52 countries. And so you just go there, click it down, and it shows you literally a menu, not a menu, a recipe for writing a book. And I've given this to countless people who've been struggling with books for weeks, months, years, and within 90 days they've got a book out ready to go to the publisher. And that's no extra charge. Okay. Now, when I started my career, I started off quite humbly. I did not graduate from high school. As many of you know, I finished in the half of the class that makes the top half possible. I left high school without graduating, and I worked at laboring jobs for several years. And I could stretch the story out, but I'll just tell you, after several years of laboring, when I could no longer get a laboring job, like many of you, I got into sales. And when I got into sales, and by the way, sales is the ultimate default profession. Nobody goes into sales. We default into sales when nothing else works. How do you get into sales? It's like backing up in a car and hitting something in the night. Whoomp. You go out and see what it is, and it's a sales job. Yeah. Often it's your own new business, you know. Maybe I'll start a business. Whoop. It's a default. Anyway, so I got into sales, and I was not afraid to work because at least it was clean work. And I threw myself like a dog at a passing car, and I'd go out and knock on doors. They said, you know, just sales is not really a sales game. It's a rejection game. The more you get rejected, the more sales you make. So I would go out starting early in the morning, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd knock on doors. I used to run from place to place so I could be rejected more often, faster. They said, keep track of your calls. I kept track of my calls. One month I made 504 calls and no sales, but boy, did I see a lot of people. And I did this for month after month, and every so often I would stumble into a sale where the person had decided to buy my product and hadn't decided to where to buy it from, and they bought it from me. They felt pity on me. So I was just staying alive. And then I went and I asked one of the top guy in our company. He was making 10 times as much as anybody else. And he would roll in. I'd start off at 7 in the morning. I'd work till 9 o'clock at night knocking on doors in the neighborhoods. He'd roll in at 9 o'clock in the morning. Customer would roll in, or a prospect. They'd have a little conversation. Prospect would sign a check. He'd make a sale. He'd go out and make a couple of sales in the morning, have lunch with another prospect, make sales in the afternoon. He was making more than anybody else in the company. He was making more by himself than everybody else put together. And so finally, I went to him and I said, what are you doing differently from me? And he told me. And this is one of the great breakthroughs in life. If you ever want to do anything, find out somebody who's doing it well and go and ask them what they're doing. Don't try to figure it all out for yourself. And so I asked him, what are you doing differently from me? And he said, well, show me your sales presentation, and I'll critique it for you. I said, my what? Well, your presentation. I said, you show me yours, and I'll show you mine. I said, by the way, how do you define a sales presentation? He said, well, a sales presentation is a logical and orderly process of, first of all, identifying prospects, and then establishing rapport with them, and then identifying their needs, and then presenting our product or service as the best choice, all things considered, answering their concerns and objections, closing the sale, and then getting resales and referrals, which loops you back into the top of the process. I was writing, I couldn't believe it. You mean there's a logical order to this? I was doing what most salespeople do when they start off. It's called the blah, blah sell. Blah, 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 blah. You find a prospect, try to get between them and the door, and they go blah, 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 and say as many clever things as you can. And if they start to lose interest, you speak louder and faster. Now, I didn't mind if they seemed to be losing interest. When they looked at their watch and started pounding it, then I started to become nervous. Well, no, he said, no, that's not how you sell at all. First of all, you determine that the person has a genuine need that your product or service can satisfy. And by asking questions to uncover the need. And if there is no need, then you carry on. You don't. So I just opened my eyes. I couldn't believe it. I learned later that he'd been trained by a Fortune 500 company when he left college. They had taken him and spent a year, 6 months in classroom, 6 months in the field, alternating back and forth like a windshield wiper until he was thoroughly trained in how to sell. He could then go into any sales organization, any product, service company, any industry, and within 30, 60, 90 days, he'd be selling 10 times as much as anyone else. I almost died and gone to heaven. And he said to me, by the way, he said, did you know that 20% of the salespeople make 80% of the money? I said, no, I'd never heard about that. And so I said, well, that's it. If that's true, then I want to be in the top 20%. That was a life changer for me. For the rest of my life, I look back and I realized it was making the decision to be in the top 20% that changed the direction of my life. And this is what I also learned. To get into the top 20%, the key is to make a decision. Just make a decision. So I made the decision, and I began asking, why is it that some salespeople are more successful than others? And I began to study successful selling. I became voracious. I used to study hour after hour. I wasn't married at the time, so I had lots of time on my own because I couldn't afford to take anybody out. So I'd get up early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd study, and I'd go out in the daytime and practice what I'd learned. In the evening, I'd review it. And I began to read books and listen to audio programs and go to courses, and I began to practice it. And I did something else which changed my life as well. I find that there's two types of people in life. There's people who do things and people who talk about doing things. And one of the keys to success is action orientation. All successful people are like yourself. They're intensely action-oriented. Most people talk about what they're going to do, but then they go to the island. You know, you heard the old saying about the guy who says, I wake up every morning at this crack of dawn full of vigor and energy, and then I force myself to lay there until the feeling passes. Well, a lot of people do the same thing, is they have all these great ideas and they force themselves to do nothing until the feeling passes. Because what we have found is that there's a direct relationship between how quickly you take action on a new idea and how likely it is that you'll ever take action on any idea at all. In the work that I've done over the years, I found that all successful people have successful habits, and all unsuccessful people don't have them, or even worse, they have failure habits. They have habits that lead to failure. And so one of the most important habits that you can develop is the habit of taking action. And fortunately, if you do something repeatedly over and over again, what do you develop? You develop a habit. Now, the interesting thing is, forming a habit is difficult. Goethe, the German philosopher, once said, everything is hard before it's easy. Just like Michael was talking about learning to play a trumpet and learning to be a drywaller and carpenter and so on. Everything is hard before it's easy, but once you have made it a habit, it's like brushing your teeth. It's automatic and easy, and you can do it for the rest of your life. Well, what I found was everything that I tried for the first time didn't work. And my first idea was to be discouraged, say, oh, darn. And then I realized nothing works the first time. Nothing works the first time. Sometimes you have to practice it over and over again. Does anybody here have a favorite recipe? Okay, if you have a favorite dish that you make at home, sometime you tasted the dish at a friend's house or a restaurant and you said, you know, I like to be able to make that at home so I don't have to go somewhere else to have it. And so the first thing you ask for the recipe. And you take the recipe home and you take all the ingredients and you lay them out and you put it all together and then you mix it up. And how does it taste the first time? Not like you remember it. But you have something that is a great advantage, and that's the great advantage of being part of this organization. You have what is called positive knowing, not positive wishing, positive hoping, positive thinking, not fantasizing. You have positive knowing because you've tasted this dish. You know this dish can taste good. So you don't quit. You're not discouraged. You realize, it's obviously I haven't mixed the ingredients properly, so you go back and you mix it again. And the second time is not quite as bad. The third time, it's tasting pretty good. Fourth time, fifth time, you may have to do it several times. But at a certain point, bing, you've got it. Now you can walk into any kitchen, you can whip that dish up, and it tastes delicious every time. Isn't that true? Now, if you understand this is the same formula for making sales. It's the same formula for making money. I have a good friend, interesting, he wants to make a lot of money. He went bankrupt, and way beyond bankrupt. He ended up living at home with his family. He's 35 years old, made several $1 million, but he went bankrupt. So he read all about how you could buy homes for little or no money down, fix them up, and either rent them out or resell them, refinance them, and do it again. So he read a couple of books, took a couple of courses, listened to some programs, and he did exactly what they said. He followed the recipe. You have to look at 100 houses before you find 10. Out of the 10, you'll get offers that you can put in on 3, and you'll end up buying 1. It's 100 to 1